We are here to promote engagement, involvement, and participation of African Asian minority community in local decision-making process, getting involved in politics, because we've realized the decision that is affecting our lives are being made by decision makers. So we need to get involved, we need to get on board.
So I've already told you what the plan is for the evening. And so we go to one of my inspirations. And you can put the next. Her name is Shirley Chisholm. She ran for president, would you believe it, long before Jesse Jackson, etc. She was the first African-American to be elected to Congress. And her slogan was unbossed and unbought. She said, you don't make progress by standing on the sidelines, whimpering and complaining. You make progress by implementing ideas. And I think that is an important thing for all of us. In order to break the barriers to participate in politics, you need to understand the political system. You need to recognize that institutional racism exists, and you need to understand the language of your environment. Next. Macpherson defined institutional racism as the collective failure of an organization to provide an appropriate and professional service to people because of their color, culture, or ethnic origin. You find it in the processes, attitudes, and behavior which amount to discrimination, even though it may be unwitting prejudice, ignorance, thoughtlessness, and stereotyping, which ethnic minority people endure. So that is a definition of institutional racism. And most people have faced it and understand that it exists. Racism in itself is a social construct. There's nothing biological about it. There are no gene clusters you can find to find that, these are African, these are Europeans, etc. But racism has tangible consequences. In terms of language, the reason why I want us to look a bit at language, we speak English, but English means certain things to certain people, the same language and different understanding. And if you look at it, it will emphasize, or how would I say, it will make racism worse. So for example, when the British say, I hear what you say, what they mean, I disagree and do not want to discuss it further. But what foreigners or non-native Brits hear is, he accepts my point of view. When the British say with the greatest respect, what they mean is that you are an idiot. And they say that, and we will, or some of us will think they mean he's listening to me. When they say that's not bad, what they mean, that's good. And it's that understatement, which is a very British characteristic. And people think, oh, he thinks what I've done is not good enough. But actually, when they say that's not bad, they mean it's good. And when they tell you that is a very brave proposal, what they are saying is you're insane. No sane person will do that. And you might hear, he thinks I have courage. When they say quite good, what they mean is it's a bit disappointing. And you might hear actually quite good, because that's what they're saying. Another set of things to make you think, when they say, I would suggest you do X, Y, Z, what they actually mean is do it or be prepared to justify yourself. And you might think they're saying, think about the idea, but do what you like, because it's a suggestion. But again, the British way of talking, and when they say, I would suggest, it actually is an instruction. And when they say, oh, incidentally, by the way, you would think that that's not very important. But what they actually mean is that this was the main reason I called you. This is the primary purpose of our discussion. When they say, I was a bit disappointed that, what they actually mean, and again, another master understatement, I am annoyed that. And you might think it doesn't really matter because they said I was a bit disappointed. And when they'll tell you very interesting, what they're saying is that is clearly nonsense. And you might think they're impressed. When they tell you, I'll bear it in mind, what they're telling you is that they've forgotten about it already. And you think, oh, they'll probably do it. So all this is very interesting. The last thing about language, when they tell you, I'm sure it's my fault, you might be wondering, why do they think it's their fault? What they're actually telling you is that it's your fault. And when in a conversation, a Brit tells you, oh, you must come for dinner, it's not actually an invitation. They're just being polite. And you might think, oh, I'll get an invitation soon. And when somebody tells you, I almost agree, what they're actually saying is, I don't agree at all. And you might think they're not far from agreement. They might tell you, I only have a few minor comments. What they're telling you is that please rewrite it completely. And you think, oh, there are only a few typos, a little things I need to tweak. And the last point, could we consider some other options? What they're telling you is that I don't like your idea. I'm not prepared to champion it. And you think they have not decided yet. And it's just a word of warning that we're speaking the same language, and sometimes the communication is different. People understand something else. And if you add racism, especially institutional racism, to this miscommunication, you do have a problem. And so sometimes you're not getting on and you think it's because they don't like you personally. You may be right, but it's good to also unpack some of the other barriers. So the barriers of language, the barriers of institutional racism. But the third thing that we need to consider when we're looking at the barriers to participation in politics is the political system. And I would say with the next slide that you need to be inspired by your ancestors. Again, Shirley Chisholm, who I mentioned earlier, she said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring in a folding chair. So don't allow anybody to marginalize you. If they won't give you a way in, find your own way in. And we'll go in to discuss a bit. I'll speak from an African perspective because I understand African issues because I'm an African. So for Africans, the racism that faces us, we call it Afrophobia. And in order to understand it and know what is happening, we use the Adrukra symbol sometimes, which is Sankofa. It means go back and fetch. And the Adrukra symbol from Ghana actually is quite descriptive by telling you that you need to understand history to understand where Afrophobia comes from. But today is not for discussing it. It's to discuss how we thrive in spite of Afrophobia. So what has happened is the organization I'm secretary of in 2019 came up with a toolkit to give us the vocabulary, to give us examples, to validate our lived experience. It was arrived at by research evidence that, and we know that the impact of Afrophobia is real. There are microaggressions you will face as you interact in this society where we are minorities. And although I'm using Afrophobia as an example, these are examples that will apply to Islamophobia, it will apply to anti-Gypsy racism, it will apply to anti-Semitism. There are people who will ask you things like, where are you from? And when you answer, they'll say, oh, but where are you really from? Where are you really, really from? That in itself is an Afrophobic trope. Because what they're telling you is that because of the color of your skin, you cannot be from this part of the world. And this is to be discussed at another time, but microaggressions are something you must confront. And we all have different strategies. And I'm hoping that in the discussion, we'll come up with how we deal with these things. But one of the things that we need to do if we want to break barriers is to get involved. And one of the ways in which you get involved is to campaign for justice. This one in the Northeast, this is Middlesbrough, where we've been campaigning for an independent investigation into children's services. And the reason we're campaigning for that is we've noticed that our community is suffering greatly from children being taken into care. Often those decisions are fueled by Afrophobia. We are asking for an independent investigation because we feel that the Afrophobia needs to be highlighted, and it can only be done if there's an investigation that comes with terms of reference which takes into account what the community is going through. For reference, those who are not aware, one of the things about Middlesbrough is that Middlesbrough Children's Services was given an Ofsted inspection rating of inadequate in all areas. So it is no secret that the service is underperforming. But what is not being highlighted is the Afrophobia within the service. And I'll end with reminding you all to remember your roots. When I was mayor, one of the things I did was go visit Accra. And when I visited Accra, the mayor of Accra received me. And in good African tradition, he renamed me. You know, when there's an event, you get a new name. And I was given the name Nadanswa, which is a name from the Gamashi people, and it's from the Ga area. And it's to say, remember your roots, because in those roots are your strength. So for further information, you can either contact Brother Olalekan or email me at impactcoalitionuk@gmail.com, and I can let you have the toolkit or any other discussion that you want to have. So thank you.
We created connections and we created a movement for change, and that is what is really important, because if you're on your own trying to fight an issue, you're just one lone voice. Whereas if you were part of a movement, you're part of a collective, then you are fighting with multiple voices, many voices, and it's the many voices that will bring being part of a collective is a powerful, powerful thing. And on my hardest days, I think, and I go back to a few key stories, a few key lives that I was touched going into politics. And I think of a young girl who was 11 years old who used to come to our youth club, and our youth club was the only thing that was on her estate that she could go to. She was suffering abuse in the home. She came often underdressed. Sometimes she had 10p packets of crisps for her dinner. And when we went to her home, she had no carpets on her floor and there was no food in their fridge. Young girls at 11 years old should not be living that life. We live in one of the richest nations on earth. How is it right that an 11-year-old should have no carpets on her floor or food in their fridges and be living on 10p crisps? And so as a youth service, we were able to intervene to a level. But if there's no funding for youth services, which was then who's going to be there to work with those young women and young girls? And if there is no government in place that wants to address issues of inequality and poverty, who don't really care, then we'll see more of those girls. And that's what we've seen. You know, the statistics are 4 million children is, this is why we need people to turn up. And I go back to her and I go back to my why. And so you can learn the language and you can learn the processes, and it's worth doing, because when you get into a position of power, then you can be in that position to make the change that you know needs to happen.
Quite a story. And I think you have actually underlined an important point, that if you get into politics, there should be a why. Why are you doing it? Why are you engaging? So that would even give you the energy to go through all the negativity that you go through. And I don't know if you all picked up what I picked up. What Sister Jessie Joe told us is that there are also internal challenges. And that's what today is about. How do you overcome those barriers which are internal? External, you expect. But most people don't realize that when you come into any political party, internal challenges, there'll be people who wanted another candidate. And if it's you who's there, they don't want you to succeed. Even though you're standing for the same party, they wanted that position. And you need to remember that. You need to remember that it's the connections you make that will make you win. You need to create movements for change, and that the collective is the most powerful.
We will sustain this meeting, so we're going to have more meetings, definitely. And don't be surprised, election is coming up. They need us. They know how important our votes are. So yeah. I'm very sure. So
yeah, and the final topic, how do we mobilize the Black churches? Because they're everywhere, irrespective of where we are. I'm from the Midlands, I'm from Derby. Can we find a practical way of linking into the local Black churches for their assistance, please?
Middlesbrough has developed that recently now. So we are launching the first interdenomination outreach. So if we do that as a benchmark, or can benchmark that model, which is exactly what we are doing with children's services. We are the one that started the campaign for independent investigation to children's services. And you can see from the whole England, it has been declared inadequate, unfit for purpose in all areas. Children's social services is unfit for purpose. And that is what the white Labour leader councillors, they don't want to hear. And we need to push that out as much as possible. So sister, we will definitely keep you in touch. We will keep on this email list. So I'm very sure we can make use of the same model.
Okay, so thank you, everybody, and have a good night. Enjoy the rest of your week until we meet again. Hopefully, we'll make some practical progress. Take care. God bless you all.
Thank you very much. I've put my email address there so that we put all those plans together. Feel free to email me. Feel free to email, and we put those together. Thank you so much. All of us join us on Facebook. Thank you. God bless you. Have a wonderful night.
Good night, everybody. Bye.
Good night.